So, welcome back to Gouldian Junction. This is going to be the second point update of the installation and my review on them. Here we have the seep point motor. It's a PM1. It's got the polarity switch built into this one. I'm gonna show you how I solder it on and stuff. But before we do that, we're gonna prepare the point and get this organized. I've still got the point in place from my last video, so this is how I normally mark the holes, as you need to drill a hole for the actual little hole inside the point for the metal bar to go into. So normally I make a mark on each side, and then I center this and just put a dot there in the center there. It's probably hard for you to see. I'll try to zoom in and give you a better look. So here I put a dot in the center, that marking my center of roughly where the hole is I'm gonna put for the point motor. So as I had actually got this pin down, I'm just gonna remove the pins out of it. So, and then I normally just mark it across like this. Sometimes I might get a ruler just to make it straight, but and then I get a 10mm drill bit to make the hole. You could use a 10mm, 11mm, 12mm, anything bigger, but 10mm is the minimum and the recommendation. So pushing down on it. I'm just trying not to, I don't want to bust through as my layout's underneath, so. Well, I might just clean this off for a second. So, I'll just adjust this. So I've just cleaned it off, moved it. Now I'm not so concerned about what's underneath it. So, drill a hole. Same method as before. If I'm underneath my baseboard, of course I'm underneath it on my hands and knees, I get a knife. I just clean off the excess pieces which have broken away. I clean that off. Same thing on the top. I'll normally clean it and then I'll relay my point back down. So, I get my point. I relay it back down in that position. I'm going to try to get the pins in the same hole as what they were in before. With a bit of luck, I might be able to just get them back into the same holes again. Save me pushing them through. Yeah, I've got that one in the same hole. I know there's a few videos out there on YouTube on how to install point motors, but this is my method. This is how I've done it. Maybe you might find something helpful. A lot of people explain only parts of it, then they edit the video out and you miss out on a lot of it. So I got my control board back again, which I used before in the last video with my toggle switch here. I've got the same toggle switch as I used before. I've got the red wire on one side that will go to the point motor, black wire on the other side which will go to the point motor, and then I've got the grey which is the positive which will go to the transformer. So I'll leave my wires here in the front here for the time being, and I'll get my helping hand, which I managed to find before, and then I'll open the point motor up. So I've opened the point motor, I've got the new point motor here, I spin it around until I get to the side that I actually want to solder on. Now, if you follow your layout, you gotta, like most point motors, they give you a diagram. A goes to the point motor, B goes to the... A from the point motor goes to the toggle switch, B from the point motor goes to the toggle switch. And then C will go back to your transformer as the return. Then you've got D and E, which are your auxiliary switch for like signals, and you can also, for what I know, you can hook this to your bus wire on your DCC, so you can get electrofrog from the F. So depending on which way the point will actually be flicked will the point whether which way the current will flow through. As I do not actually use this on my method, I will hook it up anyway just to show you how it's normally done, but I don't normally use it because this is an intra-frog point, so it's not necessary. So first things I do, I get a bit of flux, and then I get a bit of flux I do. I'm gonna just zoom in for you here. Alright, I get a bit of flux. I put a bit of flux here on the, I just put it on my knife, and then I put it here on the area where I'm gonna solder the wires to. Now this part here, you could technically put this part here, you can technically use any color wire if you want. I'm going to use the same color as I did before with a few additional colors now. So I get my wire, tinge the ends of it. Now the red wire went to my toggle switch, so it's going to either go to A or B. I'll put it to B here. So it's on B. And then my other toggle switch is a black wire, so I'm going to get a black wire, put that one to A. Now you could use the same coloured wire if you wanted to. You could use both red, both black, doesn't matter. Normally when I wire these, and I've made them, I wire them up and I go all the way, normally in one piece, to the toggle switch. I don't put a joint in them. So it's normally continually one wire, but in this video I'm going to put a joint in it just because it's going to be more simple for me. Save me wiring it all back up again to the toggle switch. So I get my green wire, which is the return wire for the negative, to go to the, it goes to the transformer. So it's pretty simple. There you go. You can already see, couple of minutes, I've already got 3 wires on. Now while I'm at it, I'll continue through. I'll add the extra wires on. If you wanted to, like, even if you are using a DC layout, you could wire them on now while you're at it and use them in the future if you ever decided to go DCC. So you could just wire them on, have them sitting there, tie them off and leave them under your baseboard. That depends on your preference. When I used them, that's what I did. So if I ever decided to use them in my electrofrog or whatever, you could use them in the future down the road. It's easier to put them on now than later when you're actually trying to put them under the baseboard, because then it's going to be a nightmare to try and put them under your baseboard. So as you can see, I've got them ones done. Try to get this back into focus. So it's hard to film and do this at the same time, as a lot of you would find. Now you can see I've got them all wired in, and now the next step would be is to, for me, I would connect them to my, I would test them just before I get onto the baseboard, and literally on my hands and knees and trying to actually wire these up or mount them in place. I'd want to test them and make sure they actually worked, because no point getting underneath the baseboard. You find out, hey, shit. You get under the baseboard, you find out, shit, I've wired it wrong, something's wrong. Then you got to get back out from your hands and knees, back out from the baseboard. So, like I said, I would normally just use this in one wire, the red wire, right to the, I would go all the way to the toggle switch without putting a joint in it. But like I said, I'm going to put a joint in this just for my convenience, so when I use the next point motor, I don't have to rewire it all again. One thing with these point motors are, they can get a little bit messy with the wiring, as it's 6 wires coming from the point motor, so it can start to get a bit messy. But depending on where your bus wire runs underneath the layout would depend on how far you'd have to run your extra cables. And considering the grey cable which goes to the frog, you wouldn't need more than maybe 20 centimeters on it. So you wouldn't need that much wire on it anyway to actually get it to go to the frog. So that one you could probably just put about 20 centimeters of wire on. But the other two, which would actually go to the power of the other two, which actually, the two middle wires here, which actually go to your bus wire, well then, they could need to be a meter or two long depending on where your bus wire is. So them ones you may have to actually make longer, shorter, depending on how far you are to your bus wire. So far we're there. We're up to, we've got that set, we've got them hooked up now. Now I've just got to wire my return to my return wire here, and then I'll test it, see if it flicks, and see if we're in business. Just turn the camera for you. So here's my return wire. Now I could cover these with my ink shrinking tube that I did in the last video, but as this is just a sample, I'm not overly worried about it. So now I've got my point motor here, right? Time to see if it actually works. Moment of truth. So you see it flicks left to right. So it works. So now I would go ahead and start installing it on the baseboard. Now, so the next step, I would mount this onto the baseboard. Now, there's a few methods you could do. I'm going to flip my baseboard over now. I wish it was this simple on the real thing. Sometimes it is if you actually prepared the baseboard like that. Now, my method of doing this, and this was my method when I installed them, I tried to make it as simple as possible when I did it. And now, the main problem I found was trying to hold it in underneath there. So what I did is I got double-sided tape, put it on one side, and then I trimmed it. So I think I did this before I actually wired the wires on, so I didn't cut the wires off. Now I remember when I'm actually doing it. Anyway, I'm going to try to cut these carefully without cutting the wires off. So the reason I did this was so that I didn't have to screw around under the baseboard with holding the actual point motor in place while trying to line it up, because it could get quite difficult. So this was my method. I don't know if anyone else uses this method. I mean, when you buy DCC concept ones, they come with double-sided tape, which makes the work much more easier. So next thing I would do, under the baseboard, I'm gonna have to bring this up a bit, the camera. I would put this through the hole here. So looking for the hole, I would put it into the hole. And then the next thing I would do is holding this centered and making sure this was centered, I would put it in the position there. Now, I'm going to show you a little trick that I learnt doing this. Be right back shortly. So, I'm back. The little trick I found was I got plastic card, whatever you want to call it, and I cut it exactly to the size in between here. And then I drilled a hole in the middle, and then you could jam that in, and that would hold your pin directly in the center place so that it wouldn't move, see? And that made it easier under the baseboard to keep it aligned in the area. And then what I would do is I would get toothpicks, and I would put toothpicks in between this area here. Okay? If I didn't have any toothpicks laying around, I found whatever I possibly could which would fit into that area. Now, I could run inside and grab some toothpicks, but then my girlfriend will probably hound me for do a chore or something, and I won't get back out here. So, for the time being, I'll skip the toothpicks, and I'll actually use these cotton buds that I have here. So what I'd do is I'd put cotton bud in there like that, and like that. That holds it in center. Okay, then I flip it around, and now that I've got the center of it, I would peel my tape off, the double-sided tape, and get it ready. And knowing that this is holding in the center place, I would carefully align it into the hole. It's hard for me to see. I'm half blind probably. And then I would put it in there, trying to keep it as straight as possible, keeping it as straight as I possibly could with the point motor. And then before I screwed it up, right, I would test it to make sure it worked before I'd screw it. So, I'm in business, it works, you see? And this was my method. Now, the double-sided tape holds it in place for the time being. I mean, it probably could hold it for a while. So, this was just my method of doing it. I don't know, I've watched a few other people, and yeah, everyone has different ways and different ideas. But this is what I found worked for me. And then the next thing I'd do is I'd screw it in place. So I had no possibility of the point motor falling out then. So I'd get my drill. I'd pre-drill a hole with a small drill bit. And then I'd get my screws and screw it up. So all I'd do is screw it up now with the screws. I'd use a screw which wouldn't go through the baseboard. I try not to over screw the screw up too tight. So I've screwed it up, and then I would do one final test to make sure that while I've screwed it, it hasn't gone out of alignment and it still actually works. Which in this case, it's gone out of alignment now, so it's not actually throwing one way. So as I'd say, I'd have to unscrew the screw and just fiddle around with it a little bit, just try to twist it a little bit to the way that I think it needs to go, and then I would test it again. Now it works. So I obviously just screwed that screw a little too tight on that side. So this screw, I think I tightened it just a little bit too much. So that's how it's done. Pretty easy, pretty fast, pretty simple. The next thing I'd do now is I would wire the wires up. So in this case, I don't have any bus wire here, so I'm not going to go further into wiring this up. But the blue would go to one side of the bus wire, your positive, your negative, whichever one you want it to go into. Yellow one's the same. You'd wire them into whichever one you need it to go into to make sure it doesn't short circuit. And then the grey wire would go through the baseboard into the point. So that one I actually could do. I could just show you. But if I do everything on the video, it's going to make it way too long. So what I would do is drill a hole here, a very small hole where the frog is on a electro frog, and then I solder it in between there, in that section there. You can also use the wire that hangs down as well. Yeah. So that's about it with this point motor for the seat point motor. Hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope it helps anybody with installing them as well. As you can see, I've explained this in a video from start to finish. It's taken me probably about 20 minutes roughly all up. It's reasonably fast in some way per point. Like I said, if you make one of these little gadget things, saves a lot of time, keeps it aligned. It gets it more or less correct the first time. My overview of this point motor was, it's great. It's a cheap point motor. I think I only paid about £3 or £4 for them, roughly. I didn't think they were overly expensive compared to the side point motor that I use, which I think I paid about £6 or £7 for them. They're kind of economy point motor in some way, and they work quite well, and they work for quite a while as well. So in that case, I'd say for performance, I'd give them probably about an 8, I'd say, out of 10. For wiring and installation, I'd say it's probably about a 5, as you got to do a lot of soldering for the point motor just to get it to work and to solder it up. It's a bit of time consuming. For the looks of it, I give it 10 out of 10 as it's hidden below your baseboard. You don't actually see it on your baseboard. It's perfect if you've got a small it's perfect if you can access your baseboard from underneath. Then it's absolutely perfect, as it's easier to get underneath your baseboard and get it. But if you've got 2 layers, and again it's not an area you can access, you have to install it before you would close that area off. Or if you can open that area, then you could install it in that area. Normally what I would do now is cut the prong here, but as I'm going to reuse this point motor maybe in the future, I don't want to waste it and just cut this off. So I'm going to save it for the time being. I'll just dismantle it and put it back into my box of point motors that I have sitting there. Yeah, what could I say overall? I'd probably give it about 8 out of 10, I'd say, for the point motor on how it is, and for price wise, it's cheap, it's reliable, it's reasonably quick to install. I haven't had so much problem with them. I haven't actually got any set up on the layout at the moment, as again I went away from this system. Mainly I went away from this system. I could tell you the negative part of it, what I had a problem with. When I installed them, one problem I found was that when the baseboard warped a little bit, which in some case over time it will eventually warp a tiny bit. And I mean, my baseboard warped very minimum amount. You could barely see it. And yet, because the track had just gone unlevel and the point motor underneath was unlevel, it would only throw one way and it wouldn't throw back the other way. And no matter how much I played around with it, no matter how much I tried to adjust it, I could not get it to flick. And it wasn't on just one point motor I had this problem on, it was 3 point motors in this area, which was an area probably no bigger than this board, which is about 40 centimeters approximately, the board is. And I had 3 point motors in this area, and just the warpness of the board made all 3 point motors a nightmare to try get them to work. And this was on my previous layout before I built the layout I've got now. And because of this problem was one of the reasons I moved away from the seep point motor, you know. And the second one was that it took a bit of time to actually get them to line up and wire everyone back to the control panel. It was about 20-25 minutes I was spending on it. And I mean, yes, wiring is a bit of a downside to the hobby, but unfortunately without the wiring, the hobby and your model railway just wouldn't work. So on that note, I'm going to leave it there. I hope this has helped somebody install these seep point motors. In my next video for the point motor review, I'm going to do the Pico point motor, the one that goes underneath the baseboard. So in my next video, I'm going to do this point motor from Pico. It goes under the baseboard. I can't remember what the product number is. I can't find the packet. This one here, you can also wire it up to a Trin micro switch if you want to add LEDs, or also this is for changing the polarity on your point, on your electrofrogs. I'm not going to go into actually wiring this up because it will take me too long, and I've never actually wired one of these up before, and I've not opened the packet, so I'm probably going to sell it eventually. So as this was another option I looked down the road with, was installing these Pico point motors at one stage. Now, you'll see this on the next video. I'll explain how I did it. If you've liked my video, you can subscribe by clicking on the top at the left hand corner on the icon, and on the right top corner you can see more videos from Gouldian Junction.